Hi, all. Hello. I'm live. I'm alone in the studio. Peter is out of town, and I was thinking he was going to be on here with me remotely, but he's not having a great travel day. So I don't know what the deal is. But anyway, I'm actually glad because I have a little rant that it's very impromptu. But apparently, and not at all surprisingly, the Congressional Progressive Caucus endorsed Shontel Brown over Nina Turner. And they did this for a bunch of reasons. Well, first of all, the Congressional Progressive Caucus is not progressive. And the other thing is Shontel joined right before Nina announced, sort of anticipating that, after she had already joined a conservative Democratic caucus. I forget the name of it. There's another caucus that's like, not the Freedom Caucus, but something like that is totally not progressive. But then in January, she joined the Progressive Caucus. So apparently they, I guess, just endorsed their own, regardless of if they're really progressive. But then again, if they were really progressive and they had any values in that caucus, then a lot of the people in there wouldn't be in there. So just to give you guys a little bit of heads up. So yes, the chair is Pramila Jayapal, who does appear to at least be progressive on the issues. The problem is I don't really get any sense of leadership or backbone with her whatsoever. She says the right things about policy, but I don't ever see her really take a stand. I find her to be kind of mealy. She's not the kind of person that I think is going to be very good in a leadership position. Then you've got Katie Porter, excellent. Ilhan Omar, great. But let's look at some of the people that are in this caucus, because a lot of them not so progressive. So let's see, just from Florida alone, I can tell you, we've got Darren Soto is a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He takes money from basically everyone that is anti-progressive that you can imagine, from insurance industries and so on. So, and yet he's a member of this caucus. So a lot of these people are in here that are not progressive, that claim to be progressive. But so they endorsed Shontel Brown over Nina Turner. However, Bernie Sanders did officially endorse Nina, and that was great. So, I figured he would. He did last time around, but having it happen officially is a really good thing. So we're going to be having sort of like an interesting night. We have some more conservative guests this evening. And first, we're going to be speaking with Wendy Nevarez, who is primarying Madison Cawthorne in North Carolina in the 11th district. And that is very near and dear to my heart because the 11th district includes Asheville, which is where I go every summer. And so it's important to me. So this is an important race to me. I mean, granted, it's a big district. Oh, Peter decided to join us. That's nice.
Had to restart the computer because apparently
I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear this song and dance. Hello. So I was just talking about the Congressional Progressive Caucus endorsing Shontel Brown, one of its members. Thoughts? Thoughts?
I'd like to be in a private room with Nina right now. That's what I would like to say.
Although, let's be real, she's not remotely surprised. And Shontel Brown did go ahead and join the caucus in January, right before Nina announced she was running.
Well, in a way, it's actually a good thing that they've endorsed her, because what they end up doing is just exposing their hypocrisy for all the world to see. I mean, this is so. I mean, look, you would have expected the Congressional Black Caucus to endorse Shontel. That would be expected, but. The idea
nothing is expected. It's whoever is in their financial interest. But I'm sitting here and looking at all the members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and there's a lot of people in here. Gerald Nadler doesn't strike me as very progressive.
Well, it's Nadler, but no, I wouldn't say that he's progressive. I wouldn't say he's. Look, you know what? The one thing you can give Debbie credit for is that she doesn't pretend like she cares. She doesn't pretend like, oh, I have to be a part of these organizations. I mean, she wants
Darren Soto. How about that one? How about that? Yeah, he's real progressive.
Darren Soto. Let me tell you something. When I met that guy, you know how you can get that sort of like that negative energy feel like when you're around certain people? Oh, Soto's got it in spades. Like he is definitely somebody. that you wouldn't trust. Jen, I thought you might like to see what I'm wearing this evening.
I understand. You went to Rutgers. What about Frank Pallone? He's in your home state. He's also progressive.
Frank Pallone is in the Progressive Caucus. Frank Pallone is New Jersey's Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Exactly. But this is my point. The Progressive Caucus doesn't mean anything, and therefore their endorsement shouldn't mean any more than the toilet paper you wipe yourself with, because they mean nothing. And honestly, as someone who is like really progressive thinking, I wouldn't want to affiliate with them. Like, if I were in Congress, I wouldn't want to be a part of that.
Well, what does it say about the Progressive Caucus that they do this in less than 24 hours after Bernie endorses Nina? You think this isn't calculated? Of course it is. They know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to steal thunder. And at the same time, they're trying to make a complete mockery of what it means to be a progressive, which you and I have been saying for at least a year now, that it doesn't matter if you call yourself progressive. It matters whether or not you're non-corporate. You can call yourself whatever you want, but if you can't actually back it up with real credentials, then, who cares?
I just find it sad. And I look at, like Pramila Jayapal and Katie Porter and Ilhan Omar, who are the three key people. And I'm thinking, what a waste of their time to be with this group of people that are clearly so basically Ilhan Omar, Katie Porter, and Pramila Jayapal are head of a caucus that just endorsed Shontel Brown over Nina Turner.
Yeah, but are they going to say anything about that? Because, Katie Porter already endorsed Nina individually.
See, and that's what I wanted to ask you about, because, see, that's the thing. All of these people that are actually progressive should come out and endorse individually Nina. And if they don't, then that means that they're cowards.
Listen, I don't even know if AOC has endorsed her at this point.
She didn't last time, did she?
I think. No, yeah. No. AOC was there when she ran last time. Listen, when we get there.
Yeah, but now Shontel's an incumbent. So that's a different story now for AOC.
Sure. But in 2 weeks, when we're there, it'll be interesting to see who shows up for her in the home stretch.
Okay, so I just got a text from friend of the show, Lauren Steiner, saying that Wendy said she's supposed to be on the show but never got a link.
He did. I sent the link.
Well,
and if she wants me to resend it now, just tell them I'm sending it. I'm sending it to info@Wendy, whatever it is. Just tell her the info@Wendy. Yeah.
Okay, it went. I don't know if you're watching, Lauren, but he said he sent it out. So.
And I'll resend it again now.
Okay. So what is her? I know that we always say we won't platform anybody that takes corporate money, but so have we vetted this woman? Do we know that she's not taking corporate money?
Don't know for sure, but I think it's a conversation.
We're going to find out. We're going to find out, because what's interesting is, have you been to her website?
I have not. I have. I haven't gone through it with a fine-tooth comb.
No, I didn't either. But what's very, very glaring to me is there's no mention of party affiliation. But it doesn't say Republican. She doesn't claim any connection to the party. She is running in the Republican primary, so I'm assuming she's registered, like she is a Republican. But I think it's interesting that her website doesn't show any affiliate. Like, she's definitely not wanting to affiliate with them. She refers to herself as a constitutional conservative. So she's definitely not going in line with the typical GOP route, which is probably smart.
Correct.
And the truth is that anyone that even is slightly better than Madison Cawthorne is an improvement. So my standards are not that I don't have very high expectations.
No, but again, we have to have these conversations about the issues that matter if you're willing to run as a non-corporate candidate. Like, it's total nonsense that Matt Gaetz claims to be a non-corporate candidate. And yet everything that he does is just pretty hideous for the most part. So, use of the term is very loose, and we're trying to change that. That's our goal. And that doesn't mean that we should be stepping away from people who are conservative. I think that is absolutely ridiculous. And, we've had these conversations recently, kind of like the people on the Democratic side who want to blame the Republicans for passing the anti-solar bill here. And again, it never would have passed if the Democrats didn't help them pass it. So
I really wish you got your text, because I sent you a really interesting text this morning about someone local that we don't really think.
Let's not talk about it.
But anyway, So it's exactly that point. It's people come off like they're really fighting for something, but they're not really fighting for anything.
Of course. And again, that person that they spoke to will be speaking to me soon enough to let them know that anything you think you know, you don't know, because what they're doing is basically shilling for one side. And
well, I already messaged said friend and was fairly clear about that. And he just said, good to know. And that was that. So yes, I saw that and I'm like, no.
Can put up one hell of a stage or one hell of a show.
Do you want to do a story time before we go?
Fine. Throw
All
me.
right.
Hit me.
All right.
Ooh.
Today, we will be reading an excerpt from the Oligarch Chronicles, Tales of Emasculated Men Vying to Destroy the World.
It's just, the image is so perfect.
Get past the hats.
It really does. Well, the only, I can't decide which is the funniest one of all.
Okay, but tonight's story doesn't involve any of these four, which is interesting. And you're going to read it, and I think you will find it particularly.
Yes, it is sports related, as you can see, which is always good.
So why don't you, go ahead.
Dan Douchebag Snyder, the owner of the Washington football team, now the Washington Commanders, with millions from season ticket holders and other NFL teams, House committee claims.
No, read the story time.
Once upon a time, there was a very wealthy douchebag. He spent many years defiantly subjugating and insulting our first people. Despite his vast wealth, his avarice was boundless, and the douchebag proceeded to pillage and steal from his most loyal subjects. With any luck, the pending investigation will result in a tarring and feathering. The end. What about drawn and quartered, Jen? We could still do that.
But it's like, this to me is just so significant because it's not just enough that he is disgustingly filthy rich off of really probably never had to really work. But that aside, he's now stealing from.
Well, I think Dan Snyder is self-made, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he owns a sports team, and the point is he's now stealing from his season ticket holders.
Well, I equate that to anybody who's owned a professional sports franchise and charges people they charge them what's known as a PSL license. So it's a personalized seat or personal seat license, or PSL as it's known. And it's this idea that, well, now you own your seat. Actually, no, you don't own anything. The owner owns the team and owns and either they own the stadium or a local municipality owns the stadium. You as a person don't own anything. And if you think you do, you've been taken for a ride. And this is no different than these owners who, with complete impunity, think that they can get away with this. This is no different than what just happened with the Buffalo Bills ownership, who thinks that they can screw local individuals or just the local community out of their tax money.
Well, they can. They do it all the time in places. Again, to me, that is not a taxpayer's responsibility to fund your multi-billion-dollar business. Your multi-billion-dollar private for-profit business is your problem. And I find it incredibly frustrating that in this particular industry in sports, we're willing to build oligarchs' office buildings for them. Like, think about how any other industry, that would be absurd. And not only do we pay for it for them, they actually have people convinced that it's really good for their economy and their jobs, when most of the people who are paying for it couldn't even afford to go to a game. So I think it's grotesque. And I think if you can't afford to build your own office building, then you shouldn't have one. So,
well, again, it's not that they can't afford, they can, which makes it even worse. The goal here isn't to ever pay for anything. It's to continue to build as massive amount of wealth as you can. And look, the dam's going to break at some point. Nothing lasts forever. You know
what? It gives me mad respect for Joe Robbie is what it does. And back in the time, I remember thinking that I always thought of them as kind of like cheapskatey kind of guys. Yeah, because they were using their own money. They built their own stadium, and to me, that's how it's supposed to be. So and anybody else, if you're using taxpayers to fund your office building, then they should be interest holders in your profits.
Well, this is the whole thing about free market capitalism, and I think this is definitely a good topic to talk about with Sean Fitzgerald, who will be coming on in about 10 minutes.
Okay, it's Wendy at Elect Wendy WNC. So you've been sending it to I don't know who.
It doesn't matter. That's her email as well as the well, whatever. I'll send it right now. Just
Wendy at Elect Wendy WNC.
All right, let me send it. One sec.
Wendy
at
Elect Wendy WNC, Western North Carolina.
.com.
It just says Wendy at Elect Wendy WNC. I'm assuming .com. It doesn't specify.
Well, it better be.
Well, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
It's open.
Yeah. So a good thing that she's in contact with Lauren. You know, Lauren's definitely been getting to know the local political landscape there quite a bit.
He has. All right. So it's sent, and hopefully we'll get her in for a quick chat.
Yeah.
But, you know, one of the things.
I'm not averse to having her back on. You know, I, of all people, understand what happens with technical issues. Speaking of which, I still do not know for sure what's going on tomorrow morning again.
Well, I told you that they would do Zoom.
But here's what I don't get. Yeah. But here's what I don't understand. So I emailed her from my personal, but then she still emailed back to the generational change, which I can't check from my phone.
All right. Well, listen, she said.
When you're back, we're going to set that up. It's ridiculous. I used to be able to, and then something happened with the password change, and now I can't access it from my phone.
Yeah. No, and again,
I'm looking forward to Actual Justice Warrior. I like the name.
Yeah. Well, again, he really goes, look, he goes hard on certain issues that we won't agree on. But I got to tell you, kudos to him because he really tries to cut through the BS. Like basically when the left is basically playing on a story that they know is going to do well with it's like red meat to the base type situation. But then he shows the hypocrisy of it all. I can
get along with most people. I pretty much get along with people on every part of the spectrum.
I guarantee you, Sean and probably a lot of others, agree that these rich billionaires do not need to be ripping off taxpayers to pay for their pet projects. That's a form of corporate socialism that I would like to think everybody thinks is ridiculous and should never exist.
Okay, so one of the other things that I texted you today, which you obviously did not get, which I think is so funny, is our non-friends that are nihilists on the left. There was something out there, and there's a graphic of like a bunch of heads, and my head is in it. But here's the thing that fascinates me the most. I wish you could see this. The people that I'm with that they think are the problem: Robert Reich, Noam Chomsky, Marianne Williamson, Vaush, John Cusack, me, and then a couple people I'm not entirely sure. And it's so hilarious. And I'm in the same chart as Noam Chomsky. Like they have no idea what that means to me.
Who did this?
Our friends, know.
Okay. If there's one thing you'll notice about the majority of people on there, with the exception of John Cusack and one other person, these are all Jews. So don't think, like I said, I'm the last person who gives a damn about that crap because I think most of it's overrated. But when it's so glaringly obvious what they're doing, they just can't hide it. They play right into that stereotype of, the white Jews control everything. And that's they're not very good at hiding that trope. But it's so clear as day what they're doing. And that's not the first time that they have included you with Marianne Williamson and Robert Reich. Now they've thrown Noam Chomsky into the mix.
But can I say something? I get it, and I don't ever really think this way, but I don't think it's a coincidence that we're all Jewish.
No, I don't think it's a coincidence at all.
Right? And I don't know, I don't want to think that, but I can't.
Well, make a list of 8 people, and 6 of them are of a portion of society that is about what is the Jewish population in the United States? Is it like 1% or 2% or something? It's come on.
Yeah.
It's so obvious.
Yeah. John Holder saying, hasn't this guy said some really weaponized stuff about trans people and George Floyd? Probably. But you know what? We're going to talk to all different kinds of people about all different kinds of things. And that doesn't mean I agree and condone it. It just means that we're talking to people and spreading ideas. And, that's what we're doing.
This is, again, why we always say that labor is the great equalizer, because labor has proven time and time again that people really check their political egos at the door when it comes to labor fighting corporate power. That is, without question, the order of the day. And as we discussed with Chris Smalls and with other people, for example, like in the Amazon Union, not just in Staten Island, but also down in Bessemer, Alabama, there are Bernie supporters all the way to Trump supporters. And nobody even thinks about that. They think about, well, what's in our best interest here for collective bargaining? The more we're able to bring those elements together, no one is going to give it. People will look at people who focus on things like the trans fight and George Floyd and the wedge issues that try to divide and conquer us. Those are the issues that will go by the wayside. We have to find common ground. That's the key, as far as I can see.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, I've never wanted, I don't really deal with the people who don't like, I'll go on any show, I'll meet with any, as of right now, I'm going on with Michael Knowles tomorrow morning, barring any technical difficulties.
I'm trying to see to it that does not happen. And you know what? We have to have these conversations, because if the two most important issues of our time, the environment and healthcare, are not being discussed at length as needed with people on the other side, how is it ever going to spread? You have zero GOP federally elected representatives in the House and Senate that support universal health care. As far as I can tell, it's a conversation that needs to happen.
Yeah. You know, at this point, I think we're just going to have to reschedule. I don't know. I didn't get another text or anything, but I don't know what happened.
I think at this point, it might make sense if she wants to if she comes in and is in the private chat, I would just tell her, you know, she wants to come.
She's not here yet.
Yeah, she wants, well, ultimately, if she wants to come after, you know, Sean is on, you know, potentially around like 9:15 or something like that, you know, that would be fine. But if not, you know, no big deal.
Yeah, no, I know. I like the idea of anybody challenging Madison Cawthorne.
Yeah, well, Madison Cawthorne's got to go. And I think that, you know, I mean, I don't know how reasonable one can think it is, but it's no different than all of the Democrats that are, you know, again, it's much more egregious when we're talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene. You know, the Democrats who are running for that seat in a plus 27R district. I mean, the only argument I can justifiably say makes sense is the fact that there are three significant statewide races that are going on in Georgia this year. You have the reelection for Senator Warnock. You obviously have Stacey Abrams running for governor. And you also have our friend Michael Owens, who's running for Secretary of State. So when you have those races, there's at least the justification that, well, we want to have money and we want to get the vote out. We're probably, you know, odds are you're not going to win. But this idea that you have this whole swath of people running in a primary to try to take on Marjorie Taylor Greene. No, if you have one person who is in the general and you want to fund them to make sure that the word gets out there and that you're getting as many people to the polls as possible, that's a smart strategy and one that's worth investing in. But the idea that you have like 4 or 5 Democrats all, you know, getting juiced up with all this fundraising to run against Marjorie, that doesn't make any sense.
No, it's just a distraction. So Wendy's here. So what do you want to do? I mean, Wendy, I know this is like, we're so far in. Do you, or is it possible for you to come on at 9:15? Can you nod or shake head? Yes. Okay. So then come back at 9:15. No one else can see you but me. But yeah, so just at 9:15, come back on. We'll come after. I'm so sorry that this happened. Peter's out of town. He controls the email. I'm just going to blame it on him. So
yeah, of course. Yeah, with the way this day's going, I'll be blamed for the Lindbergh baby before it's all said and done.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, Wendy. So guys, she'll come back after we talk with actual Justice Warrior. And yeah, it's funny because I always used to hate the term politically correct. And I always used to say, I'm not politically correct. I'm just correct.
That,
And
that's why you'll get along really well with Sean, because that's his attitude. He's like, oh no, I'm just right about everything.
If you just do what's right, it doesn't matter if it's politically correct. You're just correct. But so I like the idea of actual justice warrior, because I really am not a fan of the social justice warrior myself, and the overwoke. So, and if that's one thing that I generally tend to agree with a lot of people on the right, is I can't stand the overwoke. I can't. Like, I'm losing it with the overwoke.
No, because it's this whole idea that you have to walk on eggshells. Anything you say or do is basically grounds for, political termination. And the truth is, as we've talked about, a lot of people in high up places that are very much in the political scene, they talk about the ones that act under those pretenses and basically say, I deal with them because I have to deal with them. This idea that I can never do enough, or that I'm not considerate enough, or that I don't care about marginalized people, is just nonsense.
I think to me, when I say overwoke, it's the people that just, there's a certain level of sanctimony that oozes from certain people in their self-righteousness and in their wedge issues that they think matter the most, even though, the earth is falling apart. And I think that the distraction by people that focus on wedge issues, that to me is where we're getting out of it. I just think it's not where we need to be. So that is part of what I think is overwoke. And also the level of vitriol when somebody doesn't agree. It's kind of like, you can have a discussion with someone and not agree with them. That doesn't mean you need to hate them, troll them, and try to cancel them. And that's the problem. So to me, when I'm thinking overwoke, it isn't just that you're so aware and so, all about equality and justice. It's not even that. No. It's that anybody who dares to not fall into your paradigm of what is the perfect socially proper human being that's it, they're done. And it's this vitriol, and that is what I cannot stand.
Well, like I said, I think it speaks volumes to who is accepted in certain corners of the political spectrum, and that is a very big part of the problem. It really is.
Exactly. Fish and Chimp says this is exactly right. This is word, and whatever, and that goes to me. I say that about Dave Chappelle. I'll say that about, and if you can't watch a comedian without being triggered, you're overwoke. Because the thing is that a normal person would just turn it off if it bothers them. But if you have to go off on a rant and start bringing in your friends and hunting people down,
Chris Rock talked about this not too long ago. How he was doing a stand-up at a college, and he made a joke, and apparently the organizer of the event walked up to him and said, "You can't make a joke like that." And I'm just thinking, wow.
I take censorship of comedy as seriously as I take censorship of journalism, because comedy is so important always in terms of, and comedians are the ones who are always on the edges and are always pushing the boundaries of what we should be talking about. And so it is, there's no censorship. They're just I am vehemently opposed to any and all forms of censorship.
And I think it was Steve Grumbine who said the other day that, there's nothing more important to all of us right now than this climate crisis.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea that we're allowing ourselves to get marred down in these, on the margin type issues.
You muted.
I know. I have to make sure the creatures are not barking. Reese monkey. Quiet little baby. Hey.
Is that Lisa?
Yes.
Yeah, I had texted her asking her to remind you that we're going live when we were live and you weren't there, but apparently she wasn't with you.
Well, you weren't willing to listen to why I couldn't get on here in the first place.
Well, it doesn't matter why. I just needed you to be on.
No, actually, it does matter. I had to restart my computer because apparently my camera wasn't working.
Okay.
So that was a problem.
I hear you. And
what if I couldn't have figured it out? What if I couldn't have even gone on here? Maybe I would have been on here 30 minutes in. And then you really would have been upset. I was only late by 3 or 4.
No, I would have just gone right into News and Amuse and just done it all on my own. All on my lonesome. I got my little laptop here. I'm all ready to go. But yeah, the doggo is causing problems.
Jen, I don't know why I have to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Please put a scrolling message across that, just in the chat that says, in capitals, please hit the like button and share.
Oh, for God's sake. Why don't you put it in the chat?
Because I can't, because I told you I was having that problem getting in.
For God's sake.
Yeah, I know. It's really hard work.
Please hit the like button and subscribe. Is that what you wanted to say?
I said and share.
And share. Okay. You guys heard him. Please hit the like button and share. This is why I want you to be able to log in as a host. And I keep trying to tell you this. I've told you this for like a year.
You click. Yeah, there you go. That's it.
There you go. There you go. I can do this. It's just, you know, I'm not an octopus. Reese had a preschool teacher when they would all be asking her for things. She's like, I'm not an octopus. I don't have 8 arms.
That would make life possibly easier, I suppose.
Oh, dirtbag leftist. If you know what, honestly,
well, you're always going to have beachfront property. It might just be in Tennessee. And
I think honestly, I've always thought like if you were to be in Tahoe, that's where it's going to fall off the earth right there. You know, if you're in Tahoe, you'd have mountains and beachfront as soon as California falls off.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh, I will scroll patrons. Thank you for reminding me. And I even updated. So I will scroll patrons. Thanks, guys. It's hard to, you know, it's like I'm a one-woman show here now.
Yeah.
Okay, so what, I mean, this is obviously going to be a very interesting discussion. We don't normally talk with people on this side of the spectrum.
No, but I would definitely put Sean in kind of that Tim Pool category. I would say in terms of what, you know, he primarily focuses on. But I don't think I don't consider him to be the type of, you know, there's different types of people who are conservative. He's definitely more on what I would consider. I mean, he'll share with us his sentiments in that regard, but definitely more on the independent side. Like I wouldn't put him in the category of somebody like a Mark Levin or somebody like that.
And part of the problem is that I don't even know who that is.
You don't know who Mark Levin is?
No.
You know who Michael Savage is?
No.
All right, well, let's put it this way. Those types of conservatives, I wouldn't even have a conversation with because they don't have any interest in actually doing anything. Their interest is.
That's why I don't know who they are. I have no interest.
Well, basically, people that came up with Rush Limbaugh during the 80s and 90s, you know, Levin, I don't remember where he's based, but Michael Savage is in San Francisco, and he's basically been a guy who's just trashed San Francisco liberals forever. Like that's his pride and joy, is talking about how much he hates them. But he made a career out of it. He's had a bunch of best-selling books and all that. I mean, the truth is, and this is one of the reasons why people have accused, you know, Jimmy Dore moving in this direction, Tulsi Gabbard moving in this direction. They always say there's a lot more money on the right. Like if you're willing to say the magic words on a number of things, Candace Owens is probably the best example of it.
Oh, for the love of
God.
Holy.
You can make a very lucrative career out of it if you choose to.
I find that so grotesque. I find all of that disgusting. I find people that will say opinion for hire is disgusting for me. It's just as disgusting. Like people don't know this. When you're running a campaign, there's 2 kinds of loyalty. There's actual loyalty and there's loyalty for hire. The problem with loyalty for hire is it's only good as long as the paychecks are the highest ones they're getting. Yeah. And it's really not to be trusted. And so when you talk to me about like certain people that are willing to go on and just present a point of view for money that isn't their point of view, that's equally as disgusting. That makes you a whore. That makes you a whore.
In politics, and especially in South Florida, it's a very, it's a big cottage industry. And it's been that way for a long time. You know, the great news is that a number of them have actually, I've been seeing like a number of heavy influencers just saying the other day, I know Bill Maher said this recently. I know Jon Stewart said it recently. Just basically saying how, actually, I'm pretty sure it was Bill Maher was talking to Joe Rogan the other day because he was on a show. He said, how do they come up with numbers like $5 trillion for stimulus money? Because what's actually happening is they're earmarking X amount of dollars, a significant amount, for the consultant class. The more people talk about that, the more people talk about the fact that you have people in politics that get paid even if they lose, and they could lose 5 times in a row. It doesn't matter. They will keep getting hired. This perception that they have some sort of intrinsic value to to the actual discourse is insane. And the one thing that the Republicans are much better at is they don't tolerate that type of crap. They hire people that win. Like, to them, that matters. On the Democratic side, it's not like that. They'll hire.
About feelings. It's more about their feelings.
I don't even think it's about that. I think it's about that this is a very private club that they will protect in a very vicious way. Like, do not get in the way of their money. Like, that is one thing. Like, if you run for office and you don't hire, especially if you were to run again and you raised a couple of $1 million and you didn't hire one of these consulting firms that's part of the Democratic Party establishment, they'll come after you.
Yeah, that would never happen. Did you not notice that everybody on our campaign was like somebody that I knew, like that I trusted already? There's no way. I don't. Loyalty for hire is not something that I trust. I've seen those people. They are not to be trusted. So the only people that I trust are the people that were willing to do it for free, quite honestly.
That's a good point.
All right, so our guest is here. You want to do the intro?
So as you guys know, we like to do a lot of crossover discussions, which we think is very important. I know this is not like Politicon, where we're going to try to one-up each other. The whole goal of this is to be able to find common ground on very important issues of our time. We are not going to get marred down in discussions about, trans rights. I mean, we know where we stand, and, issues like abortion, we obviously are pro-choice. Issues like the Second Amendment, we support the Second Amendment, even if others don't. At the end of the day, we have much more pressing, serious issues right now that we have to address, whether it is healthcare, the environment, education, living wage, ending these endless effing wars, and much, much more. And so with that said, I personally, and Jen personally, as I'm sure you have seen, do enjoy his comedic approach to his politics, even though we do not agree with everything that he says.
No.
But I think if you're going to engage and have these types of conversations that are necessary, you need to bring a little levity to it, because if you're only serious when it comes to politics, you'll drive yourself insane. So with that said, a little more sanity to the discourse, and one that hopefully we'll find common ground with. Sean Fitzgerald, the actual justice warrior, welcome to Generational Change.
Thank you for having me on. And I want to apologize for being late. My computer decided to update, which always happens.
Jen, you're not the only one.
I had a similar story as to why he was late. I've heard the song and dance. All right, whatever. Onward. It's very nice to meet you.
I'm glad to be on. It's nice to meet you too. Is your name actually Jen, or is it generational? Because that's very coincidental.
No, my name is Jen. Well, my name's actually Jennifer.
Right. Okay.
I mean, but Jen is good. And I actually, Generational Change, that was your idea, right, Peter?
Well, yes, I came up with the name.
I mean, yeah.
It just worked. And, we had known each other for a number of years. Jen and I were actually volunteers on Tim Canova's congressional campaign back in 2016. We had kept in touch, and then I got to say, Jen, was it December of 2018? I'm pretty sure that's when it was.
It was like 2 years.
Yeah. So we were actually at a comedy show of Graham Elwood and Ron Placone, and this was in Miami. And we just sat down and had a conversation, and I said, you would make a really formidable opponent to Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And it just kind of went from there. And we just, Jen, could you just put the banner on the bottom, please?
Oh, for God's sake.
Yes, please.
I actually have a mutual with Ron Placone, a guy named Jeff Waldorf, who works over at TYT
Nation.
He's
great. Yeah, Jeff, okay.
He's a good guy. I've known Jeff for probably 10 years before he even started working at TYT.
Yeah.
So, he was a big fan, and he ended up getting that position because he was just producing content for the TYT Nation channel, and they were like, "Yeah, welcome aboard. You run this channel."
And speaking of the timeline, I mean, I knew everybody at TYT back in 2016, and seeing that whole evolution as to where that channel has gone as a result of that. And we unfortunately, you take the gloves off and literally let them have it. But there was an incident about a year ago where, particularly Anna Kasparian, was going after Aaron Mate based on his reporting of what was going on in the Middle East. And we said, you listen, whether you agree with him or not, you cannot throw these journalists under the bus like this. These guys literally put their lives on the line. You could say that you disagree, but you take it to the extent that you're basically saying these guys are traitors. I mean, at that point, you have to wonder, how far down the political rabbit hole have they fallen regarding what they're doing? Because if it's just clickbait stuff, I mean, to me, that's what it seems like.
I am familiar with that story. I will give credit to Stephen Michael Davis, who put out that original clip of Anna saying those unkind words about Aaron Mate. And all the chaos that ensued following that, I found wildly entertaining as somebody who watches TYT.
Yeah, actually, she actually responded to us for calling her out on that, because I did a story time called Tales of a Snowflake Princess in reference to her. And apparently that didn't sit too well with her. So she did something and posted it back at us. But I just think, when you're a talking head, don't criticize actual journalists. Just don't do that. You know what I mean? Own your place in this hierarchy. Talking heads are important for their own reason, but you're not a journalist. There's a big difference.
And to be fair, I don't know much about Aaron Mate aside from that controversy and all that, but I know he actually goes to locations to get information. Whatever perspective he may or may not have was like irrelevant to me at the time, but it just was wildly entertaining. By the way, I was listening before, like probably 10, 15 minutes before, while I was trying to set up my computer. And you guys were talking about the Buffalo Bills requiring taxpayers or trying to get taxpayers to pay for their stadium. And since you guys were talking about common ground, obviously I agree that we should not be subsidizing the stadiums of these sports teams. Sports teams have never been more valuable than any point in human history, and these owners can afford to pay for their own teams. However, there is one specific case that I do want to bring up because I think it disincentivizes the owners from putting up their own money. So the New York Knicks have the worst owner in sports in terms of his behavior on the field or on the court. However, Dolan asked the city of New York if he could relocate his Madison Square Garden, which has been moved multiple times, to where the post office is. He's like, look, that is a giant post office. There's no way that's going to be there for years. Like, I just want to relocate over there. The city of New York told him, no, they're not going to try to take anything from Grand Central or Penn Station. I think Penn Station is what's on top of or what's under Madison Square Garden. They said, don't worry about it. You go and renovate your arena. It's fine. It's all yours. So he renovates Madison Square Garden, spends $2.1 billion of his own money, does it the right way in terms of athletes. And again, Dolan, worst owner in sports, can't stand the guy, but he did it the right way. Then he goes to get his 99-year lease, which was the standard thing that all the other teams get. And the city of New York gives him a 15-year lease because they said, we're probably going to want to move Madison Square Garden to where the post office is after the fact. So Dolan got cheated more than any other owner. He's a scumbag for sure, but if I'm looking at this and I'm an owner, I'm thinking, well, why would I use my own money if the one guy who did the one time they did, and I'm sure there's more than one, got ripped off?
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so hard for people to realize that overwhelmingly, especially in politics, there are no good guys? Like, there is not like this, this side is good and that side sucks. It's really not that way. I mean, we always say that corporate special interest capturing our government is the issue of our time. And if you're on the corporate dole, we're not supporting you, and I don't care who you stand with. If you're not on corporate money, then that is what we support. And I like to think most people would agree that that's probably the biggest issue that we face, and could definitely, really make a great effort to making sure that is the message that goes around and most can agree on.
I mean, nobody likes their politicians being controlled by special interests, but I would say that I kind of diverge on this issue a little bit because, like, a lot of people think it's like you donate money, therefore you're buying the politician. But what I think actually happens is they find politicians that are already aligned with them and then support them. Because if you think about it, it's way easier to pay somebody who already agrees with you so that they can get attention and become successful than it is to pay somebody to change their position, especially if it's a fundamental position.
Yeah. Well, I think it's both. I think it's they get people. Well, I don't think they get anybody to change, but I think it's one, they get people that are going in the direction they're already going, and then there's people that'll go in whatever direction they're paid to go in. So there are people that are just fundamentally there. It's a job, and they're there to keep their job, and they like what they do, and they like the schmooze, and they like the power, and they'll go with whoever is the highest bidder. I think there's a lot of very bankrupt people that don't have positions one way or the other. And unfortunately, a lot of them are in Congress, I think. And there's a tribalism that is out of control and is not serving anybody at all. It's not serving regular people. The tribalism is just ridiculous. Like, there is no one tribe that I really completely agree with. So why would I subscribe to any one dogma when they're all bought by the same corporations? Like, how does that benefit? How does that benefit us?
I mean, I can understand that. I guess I read a book called The Dictator's Handbook recently, and I found it fascinating. I highly recommend it. And essentially the argument that's made by this book, and there's also a video series that breaks it down in 17 minutes, as if you could actually do that with an entire book, from CPG Gray. But it gives a pretty good summary, and it's what got me to want to read the book. And essentially, it makes the argument that the nature of power is that in order to hold a position of power, there are certain key interests that no matter what system you have, you're going to have to satisfy in order to maintain your position. And if you try to go against those key interests, then essentially you're going to be fighting against every single other person. And it's every politician, every dictator. It focuses on dictators for the first half of it, and then it expands it out to other forms of government. And essentially the case that is made by this book is that the only thing we could do to get better results because of the nature of power is just try to expand the coalition of people who can have influence rather than try to contract it. Because what they try to make, the argument they try to make, is that the smaller coalition governments, which are typically dictators, essentially are the worst places to live on earth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm anti-authoritarian, so regardless of what form that takes. And I think that one of the biggest problems we have, that where we see the total failure of our education system, is the amount of people that name systems but don't know what they mean. So they're socialist or communist or fascist, or everyone's very quick to pull out labels, but they don't really know what it means, and they conflate governments with economic systems, and it's sort of like this complete ignorance in how this works. So when you have both sides of people that would agree, we're not in favor of authoritarianism, but that doesn't mean we agree on the exact way that our economics should be. And I think that that's the kind of thing where we can see agreement, where Peter usually refers to it as libertarians and progressives, but it's like where I am very pro civil liberties across the board, all of them. I'm very big into the Constitution. It matters very much to me. But I do believe in social safety net, right? So, but there are definitely fundamental things that we agree on that are not relevant to partisan politics. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And that's 100% the case. And unfortunately, there's separated from partisan politics, agreement on we should have less Fourth Amendment protections, or we should maybe sometimes you don't get a lawyer in this situation, or things like that. So yeah, there are things that transcend partisanship, which is good to acknowledge them and all that. But the question I'm asking is, like, fundamentally, like, I get the drive to get money out of politics, but if there's certain power brokers that exist, like, under any system, and that is absent like literal campaign donations, then like it is getting money out of politics like is it what all it's cracked up to be, if that makes sense?
I think it would be like let's just assume, just for argument's sake, that we over the next few sessions got enough non-corporate people into Congress that they were able to change the legislation to enact publicly funded elections and get all private money out of elections. So everybody, it's like high school, everyone gets a certain amount of money and everyone gets a certain amount of airtime. And we were able to do that, like in theory. Yeah, I think it would make a huge difference. I think that if people couldn't buy Congress people, that would change a lot of things. I think it would change policy almost overnight from when we would get rid of the money. And I think it would put a lot more faith in our electoral system that would encourage more people to participate. It would allow for more people to run for office that aren't millionaires. So yes, but how long do we have to get enough people in office to make that happen? That's the problem. And in the meantime, we need to show up to a gunfight with a gun. And unfortunately, Democrats usually show up to a gunfight with spoon. And so, there's got to be, you got to just fight bad money with good money at this point. But I'd rather there be no money there.
And I think a good example of that, if you're talking about the political right, ironically, is, universally, I think from Jen and our perspective, the worst elected Republican in the country is Mitch McConnell. But interestingly enough, probably the two best Republicans elected in the country right now are also from Kentucky, Rand Paul in the Senate and Thomas Massie in the House. And the reason I bring them up isn't because I agree with them. It's because they're not bought and paid for by corporate power. They actually think for themselves. They are very libertarian in their belief system. They rarely, if ever, deviate from it. And whether you agree with it or not, you at least have to respect the fact that when it comes to the issues at bar, you know where they're going to be. You know that they're not going to, just be caving to whatever like the evangelical right wants or anything like that. And they're willing to take the heat, especially Massie. I mean, credit to him for, at least willing to be a political punching bag. And the person on the left that, I think we both agree is probably the best representation in Congress right now would be Katie Porter. I know a lot of people get really caught up with what the squad does, but to me, I cannot stand the political theater. I think it's a waste of time. It only divides us. It only, people have brands. It will be just as critical of the things that AOC does as just as much as what Candace Owens will do. So that type of stuff is not what I think is going to allow us to find common ground on the major issues, whether it is, like I said, education, healthcare, living wage, and obviously the environment and the wars. And so to me, I do think that there are good reps. The problem is when you have 535 and only like maybe 25 of them are good, that's kind of bad. Like it really bad.
Well, okay. So, again, I don't disagree that obviously money influences politics. And by the way, the way that you get high ranking in Congress, like Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House, and I forgot the majority whip leader. I forgot what they're precisely called. Yeah. So the way you get to those positions is you raise the most money for the party. Yeah. So there's definitely a pay to play element of that 100%. It's undeniable. That being said, the reason, like one of the biggest turning points in the Democratic primary in 2020 for Joe Biden's campaign was a Jim Clyburn endorsement. And the way that he endorsed Biden was unbelievable for Joe Biden. He was given an award by, I think it was Al Sharpton's group, that was named for his late wife. So in his endorsement, when he was like tearing up because it was a surprise for him, he talked about Biden's friendship with his late wife. Now, Clyburn has influence that he's built up over time, political currency, specifically in South Carolina, which was where Biden turned his whole campaign around. If you just target money in politics, then it's still going to benefit people that are like already connected with established interests. And to separate it from Clyburn for a second, because that's one guy, and you could say he's earned that over time, so he's allowed to endorse whoever he wants. The thing that I worry about is that if you were to get rid of if you were to get rid of, like, a lot of people hate super PACs, right? But in reality, super PACs, what they are people spending money telling you their opinion about politics. Like if a super PAC was a corporation called a media company, people would be totally fine with it. So if you get rid of super PACs, which are trying to use money to counterbalance the effect of media, then all we're really left with is large corporate media with even greater influence, because you kind of knocked out their competition. And I know we like to see it in like a linear way where we're like, oh, well, in these cases, the media was aligned with the super PACs. So it's like a double whammy if you're on the other side of that issue. But if you were to be someone like a Bernie Sanders, who's being funded largely like by small donations, and I think he asked people not to donate to a super PAC, like he didn't have one that was connected to him, even though they're all technically not connected to the candidates. But the fact that he got all that money, and yes, he had his passionate supporters and all that, allowed him to push back against the media to get where he was in the first place. So like if you remove that, I worry that you end up in a situation where more like basically the established interests have more power, not less.
Well, I think the perfect example of why the corporate money is such a problem is in the state of Florida where we are. You're talking about an energy monopoly in Florida Power and Light, which is owned by NextEra Energy, which is one of the biggest financial donors in the energy sector, and they can outraise anybody hand over fist. Outside of private insurance and big pharma, nobody lobbies Capitol Hill more than they do. The big difference, of course, what we face right now is we don't actually need for-profit middlemen in between us and our doctors when it comes to healthcare, but we are still dependent on fossil fuels. And as a result of that, we're not in a situation where we could properly transition. We could absolutely make amazing use of solar here in Florida. There is so much protected land where it would work. Unfortunately, when big oil has such a stranglehold and so much money, and they buy up both parties, while everyone is focusing on the Don't Say Gay bill, they shoved down an anti-solar bill that took 3 Democratic senators to pass because 3 GOP senators said, no, this isn't good for our constituents here in the Panhandle. So in the most conservative part of Florida, they voted against it. But sure enough, they got 3 Democratic senators to come along and get that bill through, which is screwing us, the taxpayers, and it's also hurting the environment. So I that's where I think is a prime example of where the corporate money in politics really becomes a problem. Because if they want any candidate, and it's not a question of, well, how do you know this person's going to take the money and it's just going to do exactly what the corporations say? They only need a few of them to really do it. And when the margins are so narrow, you just got to pick off the ones that are going to do what they're going to do. And without naming any names, when you have people who just want to point the finger at DeSantis and say that he's the problem, even though this guy is already, and Jen and I have been saying this for over a year, Sean, he is the next president if he's able to build up enough momentum against Trump in the primary. I do believe that as of this moment. And so while everybody's just pointing the finger at him, it's like, but that it can't get to DeSantis unless these others are willing actors in the process. And so that to me is one of the biggest problems with this whole entrenched corruption within the system that Jen and I are vehemently against. And if you know anything about Debbie Wasserman Schultz, it's on steroids down here in South Florida.
Yeah, I don't know the particulars of Florida's energy monopoly. I know that a bunch of power grids are run by these like pseudo government organizations, and that creates a lot of problems. And I don't know the specifics of that bill. I will say that I'm a big nuclear power guy, especially when it comes to like the climate change issue. And what I've found in my research, and there's a documentary that features something that happened in Long Island where they built up a nuclear power plant. There's a story about the Cuomos, Mario Cuomo to be specific, and it was ready to go. Like they did the test, they tested at 5% capacity and all that. It was all good, and then all of a sudden, a campaign was launched against it. And obviously, these anti-nuclear campaigns have been in this country for decades and decades, even though statistically it's the safest energy that you could have. Like more people die climbing up windmills to do repairs than in nuclear power plants, and especially when you factor in radiation, it's just not a thing. And this plant ended up getting shut down by Mario Cuomo, and there's actually copies of the ads because in the bottom it says you have to paid for by this organization and all that, and the ads heavily feature solar. They're like, we should do solar instead of nuclear, like solar's the way and all that. This is like in Mario Cuomo's reign, so this is 90s or
1984.
Yeah, 1980s, sorry. Yeah. And those pro solar ads were paid for by the oil and gas industry. Like, so a lot of times they use green energy products as a proxy to get their foot in the door, because even if we innovate in such a way that solar and wind works, unless we have the battery capacity to store, there's always going to be at least a natural gas backup, worst case scenario, a coal backup. And this is one of the reasons why, like, I'm very pro nuclear. So I don't know the situation specifically in Florida. And if it's something that was allowing, if they really have a monopoly and it was supposed to allow the consumers to pay less to the company, then I could understand them lobbying against that. But I will say a lot of times the subsidies that for green energy are really subsidies for fossil fuel companies under another name. And a lot of that is due to the fact that we're just terrified of nuclear. because of the China Syndrome, that movie, and
There's
3 Mile Island.
People, even friend of the show, Lauren Steiner's, people who understand science, health, and economics are against nuclear power. And I've seen this. We've gone over this back and forth a lot on our show. We actually had somebody on talking about nuclear power. And my position on it is that if you get enough really smart people together, they can come up with solutions. And so I do not understand the science enough to say that, oh, this is the one way or this is not the way. But I think that in the position that we're in, to worry about long-term effects of something that's better than what we're using is sort of like, it's a moot point. Like like nuclear, I'm sure does have problems. I
actually do support nuclear from this perspective. We've had Michael Schellenberger on the podcast. We'll probably have him back on again. There is a fourth generation nuclear technology that I'm sure you're familiar with, Sean, that is basically supposed to reappropriate and basically replenish nuclear waste. And that, to me, that is the issue with the current system of nuclear, is that it does produce nuclear waste. There is adverse health effects. Is it the same as what happens with fracking wells and with coal mines? Probably not. However, that doesn't mean that it's not bad. And obviously things like Chernobyl and Fukushima, those are always the outliers and they're terrible. But what cannot be denied is that if nuclear version 4 is going to allow for the elimination of nuclear waste, and it's ultimately going to bring us one step closer to nuclear fusion, then that is the direction that we absolutely have to take if we're not able to unilaterally just, again, this is one of the things that I think if Bernie Sanders was president, he would have ultimately done, which was implement the Defense Production Act and just start building out the solar fields, the wind farms, and the geothermal plants and whatnot. But Joe Biden is completely bought off by big oil. So, there's I think that's a big part of it.
I would say so. I was anti-nuclear when I didn't know anything. I watched The Simpsons. I saw the that cartoon.
Three-eyed fish, man.
Yeah. But the thing is that even nuclear waste is a total misdirect, because if you stack all of the nuclear waste that we've made throughout human history, it fits on about half of a football field, about 10 feet high. Like, it's not that it doesn't produce that much waste. And so even without the I believe it's the thorium plant that would use the waste from previous plants, even without that, it's still not that huge of a problem. Obviously, there's a lot of fear. Fukushima, you named, is a perfect example of this. But it turns out the 2 people died from Fukushima. And the 2 people who died during the evacuation due to the panic, due to the fear of the radiation from the Fukushima reactor. So we're greatly overestimating the effects of the dangers of nuclear power, and I think it's due in part to the fact that we think of the atomic bomb. We had the movie The China Syndrome come out, and I think 3 Mile Island melted down 2 weeks later, so people were expecting that to happen. On top of that, they have it's radiation, so it's invisible, so we get scared because we can't see it, and there's always that idea for potential harm. But one of the things I'm most interested in is apparently in the 50s in the nuclear playground, we had a reactor that uses liquid metal. It's like I forgot what it's called, but it's basically a liquefied metal instead of water. And during the reaction, if the reactor's overheating, because heat expands, the fusion reaction will actually halt because the whatever particles won't be able to bounce off of each other because they have to do it within a certain range. And this is a nuclear reactor that can't melt down because of that. So it will self-shut down. And we've had that since the 50s. We never built it out to any scale because we needed nuclear submarines. And one of the downsides of the liquid metal is that it explodes if it comes into contact with water. So obviously it wasn't good for a submarine, but that's the only reason we have in all of the nuclear reactors water-based cooling systems, which a lot of what went wrong in these nuclear plants that had meltdowns is that the generators didn't work, so the water couldn't cool the reactor.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of information is misinformation out there, and people basically just like to work backwards from their conclusions. And I think that whatever your conclusion, you're going to find the information that sort of justifies what your belief system is on this. And I've just always been very open to the idea because in my mind, we are not going to be able to live the lives that we live with green energy the way we have it set up now. It's not possible. You can't fly a plane on solar. So there's certain things that require a level of energy that we just do not have at this point in time doing with green energy. We just don't.
Right.
So, would people be willing to sacrifice?
I will say there are electric planes. Like they're working on them. And the cool thing about electric cars, I used to be like, I'm mean, bad man, conservative. Electric cars, those are for wusses. I've been converted on the electric cars, except for the fact that a lot of them are powered by fossil fuels when you plug them in. But like they're very low maintenance. Like it's a very tiny motor, because all it is a battery connected to a motor. Almost everything in the car's engine is built to compensate for the fact that you're creating a little mini explosion in the engine. And electric cars don't have that problem. So like there is advancements in electric technology and all that. And I'm fully on board with that. Also, a bunch of the, like Tesla, the leader in electric cars, manufactures their cars in the United States. And, so that's wonderful for like the jingoism element of it. But I will say the cost of fossil fuels in terms of deaths from like outdoor air pollution, it's something like 30 to 40,000 people die from diseases or from illnesses related to that would be gone if they were getting their energy supplied to them by nuclear. And when you look at like the actual people who died from radiation from nuclear, it's very small, and most of it is related to Chernobyl, and even that's dramatically overstated. Even the preventable cancers that are aggravated, like the thyroid cancers, it's something, the estimate is like 4,000, and that's the worst disaster that we've ever had. And there's actual consequences to not going nuclear. The Germans very famously like invested twice as much money over time into solar energy and wind energy as the French did into their nuclear system. Now, the French were doing this unrelated to climate change back in like the 70s. They were building up these reactors. If you don't count the German carbon reductions that came from when East and West Germany unified and they shut down the very dirty coal plants from the Soviet Union side of it, if you don't count those carbon reductions, since Germany has invested in this technology, their carbon footprint has gone up dramatically. But the French carbon footprint has gone down, and they get a huge portion of the energy in their grid from nuclear power. Like, this works. Even Japan, pre-Fukushima, they were reducing carbon because they were heavily reliant on nuclear. Post-Fukushima, now that everybody's scared, their carbon footprint is going up because they're importing coal in order to supply their energy.
And the one argument that you do make that I think is very valid is the fact that nuclear is not subsidized the way that solar is. And listen, I think solar is great, but you got to keep it 100. The truth is the amount of solar panels it takes to equal one nuclear power plant, even if it's a generation 4, is a lot. And we cannot underestimate how vital it is for us to get off of coal and natural gas. We have to do it. And the only way it's going to happen is if we have all ideas on the table. I tell people all the time, and this is people who think that it's not, the environment's not in risk and climate change is overrated and all that. I say, well, if you have a choice between a solar field and a fracking well in your backyard, which one are you taking? And we all know what the answer is. So I think having this conversation is immensely important because there are people in the chat who are talking about, well, it takes a long time to build the nuclear reactor and this, that, and the other thing. And the attitude should basically be, well, we've basically been given a timeline of about 10 years. So if we're going to work within that parameter, it's not going to take 10 years to build, a fleet of nuclear power plants in various parts of the country. And if you're overly concerned about where they are, I got news for you, ladies and gentlemen. There are endless amounts of empty space throughout the United States. You may just not know about it, especially out west. And, to me, we really have to be collectively having this conversation because if we're not going to get bogged down in, like I said, pointless stupidity, staying on, as Jen likes to say, staying on the hamster wheel, this is key. And I do think, and that's why having Schellenberger back will be very important. I have not been, I was adverse to nuclear before, but after really doing a lot of research on, the fourth, generation of nuclear power, I think it is definitely something that could mitigate a lot of the problems that we have now. And if we're going to reduce our carbon footprint, which, let's face it, that's supposed to be the most important issue here, nuclear basically has very little, if any, carbon footprint. And
The
when you
the
compare that
the,
to
the footprint would be in the construction. Once it's up and
yeah,
running, it's just water vapor that's coming up from those stacks.
yeah. And again, people have every right to make the argument regarding solar when it comes to mining for lithium. That definitely has a carbon footprint. And is it the same as burning fossil fuel? No, but we have to take everything into account. Wind farms keep getting better. I personally think that biofuel is the future regarding jet fuel because it absolutely has the capability of replacing it, even if we don't get to depending on how long it would take to get to an electric airplane. But the solutions are there. We just, like I said, we just have to collectively figure out ways to work on it. And I think that this is, very important. But you obviously, I think we can have a little fun. There's no reason we can't, right, Jen? We should be able to, have a nice little transition. You brought up Tesla. Jen is not the biggest fan of Mr. Musk, but I will say this. We are free speech absolutists. Censorship is so ungodly dangerous. I really don't understand how people don't get that. With Elon taking it's not a lion's share of control of Twitter at this point, but certainly significant enough where he could actually change the course of where free speech goes in this country. How do you foresee that unfolding with what he's planning to do right now?
So right now he's the largest shareholder, but it's something like I believe it's like 9%, closer to 10%. So in terms of actual power to influence Twitter, he doesn't appear to have any. However, he did reject an agreement to take a position on the board that would have capped him at being able to buy only 15%ish of Twitter. So there is a good chance that Elon Musk is looking to make significant changes, and this might be a hostile takeover situation. And considering the way that these social media companies act and how they hide behind the fact that, oh, free market, we can do whatever they want. Like now all of a sudden, everybody who was on board with that when they were censoring for their political objectives is freaking out because Elon Musk said, well, free market, I can do whatever I want. I'm legitimately contemplating a hostile takeover. On top of that, Elon Musk could have bought Twitter because apparently the SEC fines are not significant enough for people to meet that 10-day deadline. Because remember, he made this purchase last month. He had 10 days to reveal it. And he was conducting polls about what if he did it when he already owned the company. So he paid those little fines and all that. But yeah, so he might actually already own it. Theoretically, like that is possible. He's shown a willingness to not care about those fines. But if he did take over, I'm optimistic that maybe there will be changes on Twitter. I hope even just with enough of a big enough share that he could have some influence in the company. But yeah, I think he might have even done it for the meme though. Like you never know what Elon Musk is going to do. He's notorious for saying crazy stuff and then bailing out. So like I'm not super optimistic, but it is funny.
Well, one of the things that we unfortunately as a little engine that could podcast here on YouTube, we are absolutely decimated by the algorithm. None of our shows obviously show up. We grind really hard in terms of being able to get this out there to as many people as we can. We have a very nice young gentleman who's coming on to help us out with some of that back end stuff, kind of like with TikTok and Instagram, because obviously there's only so much time you can devote to it in terms of promotion. But what have you found has worked for you? Because obviously you've grown a very effective channel over the last couple of years. And if there's anything in particular that you would say has really worked well for you, I mean, like I said, you pull no punches in terms of your commentary, but certainly there's probably some things that you've observed that make a difference in what is going to get attention versus what is not.
I would say for YouTube on the back end, it's very important that you actually utilize your tag function in I know it's like such a basic thing. And one of the things that I do is I'll go into the page source of the video that I'm responding to or a popular video on the topic, and I'll see what tags are attached to videos that are successful. And as long as they're relevant, I will add those as my tags. Some people use codes or they'll put like the old one was like Call of Duty or whatever. Like don't add tags that don't fit. But as long as you're actually paying attention to your metadata, that works. And also, as much as I don't like the restrictions in YouTube, they have clarified a lot of what they want you to do. So if you just follow the monetization guidelines when you upload, if you follow the rules and you keep yourself monetized, like as much as they say that doesn't have an impact, in reality, you got to keep yourself monetized, because why would they share videos that they're not going to make money off of? The whole game on YouTube is a split between you and them. So figure out a way to deliver the information that you want, but comply with their rules. So like if it's, I don't like showing violence anyway. So like the fact that YouTube punishes you for showing graphic violence, totally fine by me. But I'll make sure to edit clips, like, you know, edit out like anything that, because a lot of times people don't need to see that. There are rare occasions where they do, and you have to make those judgment calls, especially if you're covering something serious like war. You don't want to sanitize the evil, but you have to know when you can explain stuff in ways that fit, where you can communicate your message without compromising, but at the same time you're doing that. Also, a good thumbnail always helps. And as cheesy as it is, that stupid one word in all caps and red text, it 100% works. I changed my thumbnail style to that, and I'm like, there's no way that this works. It works. People click on it. They fall for it. So
I'm the one who does tags, and that's sad for us because I'm the most technologically challenged person. I'm a dinosaur. And so I don't really know. I really don't. Like I put tags that are tagging what we talked about, but I don't do like I don't even understand. And I honestly don't even know what metadata means. I don't know what that means. So that's that.
Basically, it's statistics, you know, information that you need you know, look, I mean, we had Jordan Chariton on the other day, and we talked about, you know, the whole thing between AOC and Crystal Ball, because it was relevant, because obviously, you know, we're huge proponents of labor. That's our big thing. And we really felt that. And listen, AOC's obviously, you know, she's way too much. And that there's a reason why a lot of people, you know, I mean, we don't agree, but there's a reason why a lot of people start throwing around, you know, she's, you know, Nancy Pelosi in training. And it's like, well, if you're so much about the show and not so much about the substance, you know, the criticism is going to have validation. And by even having that, you know, one clip made a huge difference in terms of viewership, commentary, all of that. So, yeah, sometimes you have to go for it in that regard. But at the same time, you know, we don't want to sell short the fact that our focus is really on policy and not so much on, you know, the theater, if you will.
right. And if you're going to make anything about like somebody like AOC or Crystal Ball, include them in the thumbnail. Also, I'm going to send you this link that is just easy to use. If you throw an image in there, it's like magic. It will take out the background for you, so you can do those like thumbnails and all that. Totally free to use that version of it. I would just recommend it. I threw it in the private chat just as a little. Yeah, I would painstakingly cut stuff out for the thumbnails, like little technical things like that. And also like on the content side, if you know it's a lie, if you know it's wrong, even if it's on your side, don't do it, because that is all short-term gain. That's gonna hurt you. I just did a video about Ketanji Brown Jackson, and I talked about her sentencing stuff, and a lot of people in my audience are very concerned about her sentencing. But the thing is, I looked into the issue, and the prosecutors were recommending low sentences. The U.S. Probation Board was recommending low sentences on those particular cases. It became the standard practice for all the judges, all the prosecutors, no matter who appointed them, to recommend lower sentences. So I have two choices. Do I jump on the bandwagon and go after Ketanji Brown Jackson on the sentencing issue, when in reality, she's a little bit more lenient? Everybody's more lenient than the sentencing guidelines because nobody follows them. But comparatively, she's a little bit more lenient than other judges, like on the lighter side. But again, we're talking about, like, people are saying she gave a guy 3 years when she should have given him 10 years. And in reality, and that was the worst case. And I talked about that case in particular. But in reality, the prosecutor wanted 2 years and the probation office wanted a year and a half. The defense wanted 1 day, which good job on the defense for advocating for 1 day for that crime. So she settled on 3 months and a ton of probationary restrictions, and she actually strengthened them when new information came 6 years later. So she was still up on the case. So like, if it's something like that, like, and you think, oh well, I'm gonna just say it because it's convenient for me, don't do it. Just tell the truth. You'll some people will get mad at you, but you don't want those people with you anyway, because they're just going to pressure you to push more and more partisan narratives.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see how a number of channels have completely transformed themselves as a result of that, basically chasing the cloud, chasing the dollars. And, we do this, the money that we raise is money that goes to various causes, whether it's, we have homeless care packages that we put together. We also do, community gardens is a huge thing. And if there are non-corporate candidates, that are out there that, we'll obviously let the audience know about that we support. I think that's, we're not trying to be purists here, but I think our message holds true. And I think a lot of people appreciate that. And, that's why we have a lot of amazing guests. You've been fantastic. And, what I would say is probably one of the better places to sort of wind down the conversation is you have
they want to talk about critical race theory. We've got people talking about
because that's just so damn important. No, I actually thought it would be a good place to wind down the conversation since you are in New York and this is a huge election year, to say the least. There's a number of things that are going on. When it comes to the governor's race, it's going to be pretty contentious. The issue that we're really gung-ho about is the New York Health Act, because, again, the removal of the for-profit middlemen in between us and our doctors is one that I think is only going to happen at the state level first, much like cannabis legalization happened, much like marriage equality happened. To think that we're going to get anything done on Capitol Hill is a complete misnomer. It's almost zero chance of something like that happening. But in a state like New York, I think we would have a much better chance than it would be in other places. So what are the things that you're focusing on regarding the upcoming New York elections that you think are very important? Because the political entrenchment in New York is really, really, really bad.
Right. I have one more tip that is unbelievably important. This microphone, get a good microphone. This is the Shure SN7B. I took off after I had it. I should have invested in this microphone. So that's the one tip. As for the elections, the governor's race is one of the ones that really makes me uncomfortable because there's been a lot of changes at the state level, specifically bail reform, that I'm very concerned about. And the candidates, Hochul, I mean, all of a sudden she's like this super progressive when she was obviously the next person in line behind Andrew Cuomo, like the whole time. And now she's portraying herself as this completely different person than, she was a nobody before. So maybe she was always this person, but like she clearly was tied in with the Cuomo regime. And then you have Letitia James, who's essentially using her position as the attorney general to she ran on, I'm going to prosecute Trump. And as somebody who's interested in law and civil liberties, like Trump could have easily committed a crime and you could prosecute it. I'm totally fine with that if that's the case. But the whole point of an investigation is you need probable cause and then you start an investigation. You shouldn't run an election on you're going to start an investigation. Well, she's the one who buried Andrew Cuomo, and as many issues as I had with Andrew Cuomo, she's using her position at the attorney general's office to go after her political opponents to set herself up for a governor's race. So like her being rewarded for that is one of my number one concerns outside of any specific policy. As for a universal healthcare program on the state level, I feel like it's been passed in a few states so far, and after it's passed, a bunch of the politicians in those states feel like they can't do it at a state level. I'm not a big universal healthcare guy. That's not something I believe in, and I think states not being able to do it might actually be a thing where they can't do it because they don't control their own currency. And I know people like to say just because the states can't do it doesn't mean that the federal just because the states can't do it means that the federal government can't do it. But in reality, federal governments do this all over the country. And I don't think it's the best. I think there's always trade-offs in terms of healthcare. I would like to have a longer conversation about healthcare if that's possible, maybe like separate. Sure. But like my number one issue with the proponents of universal healthcare is that oftentimes I find, like, because I'm willing to admit that it is possible that a government-run system can be better than what we have now. But the thing I have issue with is that a lot of people don't acknowledge that there are trade-offs in the system. Like you are going to lose some things that, especially if you're an American, you felt like, were all part of the system, because obviously you can't just put everything in the US healthcare system on the government's dole. It's going to cost a ton of money. This is why even in Bernie Sanders' plan, he cuts reimbursements to providers by 60% year one. Like we have no idea what the hell would happen if we did that. but that is in the plan, because even Bernie Sanders acknowledges in the paperwork that you're going to have some trade-offs in a system like this.
I think the big difference, and this is, what statistics generally bear out when it comes to other countries. I mean, again, everyone is different. I do not agree with the philosophy of communist countries, particularly, the best example is Cuba, where you cap the income on doctors. I do not believe in that. I think if you're an amazing doctor, I think the free market does work in that regard, where, if you're doing an amazing job and you want a 3-month backlog that's going to ultimately get you, let's say, $1 million a year or whatever, that's fine. Problem that I have is there is no use whatsoever for Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Health. They have no reason to exist at all. They do not improve healthcare outcomes. They are the biggest corporate whore out of anybody in our society. Again, they do not do anything to make our healthcare better. Now, if you want to talk about incentivizing, based on, let's say, quality of life, living a healthy life, checking off certain boxes as a means to reducing healthcare costs, I'm absolutely fine with having that conversation. I have no problem with that at all. And obviously, subsidizing fast food companies would be a great example of something that should just completely go out the window. And so I think there is a place for us to have, and with Jen, I'd love to be able to speak with you again, Sean.
We'd love to have you back. Like I really never have a plan when we have someone on, like, what we're going to talk about. I just literally see where, unless it's like somebody who wrote a particular book, but like, I just generally see where it goes. And I mean, we could talk to you about all sorts of things. And I think people want there to be fighting and debating. And I don't feel the need to be fighting and debating.
I will say there is something that we're going to agree on, even though we might disagree on the solution, is that one of the biggest problems with medical insurance companies is that medical insurance, just like any other insurance, is that you're paying a certain amount to protect you from the potential financial loss. So when we look at the outcomes of the healthcare provided by these insurance companies, we're trying to measure health insurance companies by standards that they're not meant to do. Like, they're not meant to provide you healthcare in all these different ways, which I think we would all agree on. But we have this weird system where it's like, I would argue in a lot of ways it's worse than the government systems that people are so worried about, where we're trying to force these private companies to do something that they're not supposed to do. Like, they're not designed to do. They're designed to insure you against financial loss. And we're like, well, can you cover this prescription, but not this prescription? Can you do this, but not that? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it would actually be more sensible in terms of how we're managing the regulatory system related to these insurance companies to have a national healthcare system. So I will say that, because our regulatory system is absurd right now.
I think that couldn't have been I could not have picked a better way to end the conversation. Would you say that, Jen? Would you agree?
Yeah, no, it was great. Thank you so much, Sean, for coming on. It was very nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah,
absolutely,
and
brother.
anytime you want to platform us, feel free. Have at it. We'll go anywhere.
I'm gonna get into streaming as soon as I have like events this month. So like, as soon as I'm like, my schedule's not insane, I'll get into streaming, and I will keep you on the list. But I'll DM. The email thing, too professional for me.
Okay. No, look, I won't hide it. I will go on anywhere to promote and try to get viewers. So, it's just what we try to do.
I think the conversation was extremely productive. And even though we don't agree on everything, I think we agree on enough where we should definitely have more of these conversations with you and many others going forward. Sean, thank you so much, guys. If you are not currently subscribed to the Actual Justice Warrior, get the heck over to that channel now and subscribe. You're not going to agree with everything he has to say, but I think you might get a couple of good laughs out of it, because that's really what he's about. A lot of great entertainment. Sean Fitzgerald, the Actual Justice Warrior in the flesh. Thank you so much, brother. Have a great evening.
You too. Thank you for having me on. Bye.
Absolutely.
Look who's here. All right, let's get Wendy on. She's been so patient and sitting there waiting.
Yes.
And I want her to get the tail end of this audience. So without further ado, guys, this is Wendy Nevarez. She is running in North Carolina's 11th district against not friend of ours, Madison Cawthorne. So welcome, Wendy.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Thank you. Yeah, we can. So I noticed on your website, because I did a little bit of searching, and it doesn't say that you're a Republican anywhere, but yet I know you're running against Madison in the primary. I'm wondering is that just because you're not completely on board with everything that they have to say or what their platform is? Or is it just like, strategy or what? Because I know there's a world of things that differentiate you from Madison Cawthorne.
Yes. So I've been a Republican for 20 years. And I don't think that the party should define who I am as 100% as a candidate. When we talk about platforms, you stand on a platform. You don't. It doesn't make up everything that you are. So the unfortunate thing is that the party has gotten away from having a sturdy, solid platform. And so, it wasn't really strategic. I chose just to speak to what I believe needs to happen and change and unity. So, maybe it's oversimplistic, but I believe that once somebody is in office, they represent everyone and not just the party. And so, in keeping with that theme, that was pretty much just how it all got developed.
And let me ask you, so where are you I know where the 11th district is, but where do you live in that?
I live in Buncombe County, so I'm about a block and a half outside the city limits in Buncombe. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So you're basically outside of Asheville, is what for yes. People who know Buncombe County.
Sorry.
No, I know because I spend every summer there. It's my most favorite place in the whole world, and I want to live there. So this is why I have a particular interest in this. And Madison Cawthorne does not represent any part of that part of North Carolina that I've ever seen. So I don't know who he's representing. And I know plenty of red conservative people there. So it isn't that. So talk about who is he serving? Because he's not even properly representing the conservatives there.
Yeah. So, Madison Cawthorne is clearly serving himself. He has a constituency of one. That's pretty much the best way to put it. And, my platform is based on truth, honor, and service. And it's funny, y'all talked about theatrics. When I speak, I ask people, wouldn't you rather have truth over theatrics, honor over hostility, and service over self? And it just basically shows everybody the difference between him and I. So, yeah. He's serving himself.
We got to talk a little bit about issues. Obviously, we are big proponents of not having corporate money. We don't platform corporate candidates. So what is your stance on taking corporate special interest money?
I don't think it needs to have any place in our electoral process. So
yeah. So you're small dollar donations.
I am small dollar donations.
See, you are the Republican we've been waiting for.
And it's not only that, but we were just talking before about the fact that there really is limitation in regards to that approach more so on the GOP side than the Democratic side. The Democrats have problems. GOP is even worse when it comes to corporate money. But whether you like Representative Thomas Massie or Senator Rand Paul, the one thing that I do like and respect about them is that they are not bought and paid for by corporate interests. You pretty much know exactly where they're going to be on almost every issue because that is where their principles lie. You don't have to agree with them. I frankly don't with a lot of what they stand for. However, I think if we're going to have real discourse in the United States, it's going to come from having representatives that we can disagree with, that we know are answering to their constituents and not to their corporate donors. To me, that's everything in the political system today, as I'm sure as a conservative you would agree would make a huge difference.
100%. In order to build trust with the American people back into our government and our political system, that consistency, regardless of whether you agree or not, is exactly how you get there. So,
yeah,
I completely agree.
You refer to yourself as a constitutional conservative, and I appreciate that because I actually take the Constitution very seriously myself. I have one. I usually have it right here, and I don't have it here right now. But I've actually read it. And I think that when people do that, it's fascinating, that people like to talk about it. And then there's people that cherry pick which amendments matter more to them, and they don't really take the whole spectrum. But talk a little bit about like where you would see that you are aligned more with, let's say, conservative values in terms of policy, and where you are not. Like we were talking about universal healthcare. Like, what is your stand on universal healthcare?
Yeah. So I agree a lot with Peter in that there are, if somebody is extremely good at their job, they should get paid well for it. I believe in the merit-based system. I also believe that healthcare is a human right. I mean, you can't have life and liberty and all of these other things without good healthcare. So it's, that's a tough and a very large issue. Step one is, like you said, cutting out the middleman earlier. I've personally lived in the gap. I'm sure you know what I mean by that. It's you're not poor enough to have Medicaid or Medicare, or old enough, and then you make too much for that, but you don't make enough to be able to pay the $500, $600, $700 a month in premiums, and then out of pocket expense. So I've been a single mother, and I've had to pick and choose, and so I've lived in that gap. And those are the people that I'm hoping to help when I get into office. So
there's no question that the biggest issue that I've come across, and Jen, I'm sure you would agree, you've come across when it comes to talking with conservative voters regarding universal health care, is they do not want the government to run it. And I completely understand that, because that's not what we advocate for. There is a significant difference between government run and government funded healthcare. And knowing that distinction is how we ultimately get there. Because in a single payer system, the government's working for us, not the other way around. And that is the thing that, frankly, a lot of libertarians actually get, which is what is going to get us the best coverage at the lowest cost. And if we're able to do that, which is exactly what this type of universal healthcare system is how we get there. We do not have any reason, as I said before, to have private insurance. It is a complete misnomer. If you have certain supplemental needs that you want, or frankly, it's not even needs, it's wants that you have, you can pay whatever you want to pay. That's why there's always going to be a private doctor market. But to say that you need a private insurance broker to make that so, it's absolute BS. We haven't cursed tonight, so let's not break that streak. We're going to stay on.
We haven't?
No.
We
Yeah.
Oh my God. I don't even usually realize it. It just sort of comes out.
And now it's going to be in your mind, so you don't mess with it and keep staying monetized till it's over.
So
I do think that is an issue where we can absolutely find the common ground. And look, the GOP power brokers, they spend a lot of money in states like North Carolina to distort the truth about universal health care. They don't really have to do it much to your neighbors in the South, because Lindsey Graham does a good enough job on his own doing it.
Yeah.
But the truth is, we really do have this common fight, because as much as people think that we want to have universal health care the way that they have it in communist countries, that is not what we want, and it's not what I think anybody really wants. If you're a great doctor, you shouldn't have to be told, well, you can only make $100,000 a year, and you have to see absolutely everybody at all times. That's not how this works. It's not how it works in Canada. It's not how it works in most places. And so I really do think that if this is one issue that we can nail, along with the environment, I mean, to me, that's more important than getting bogged down in the other things you were talking about before, that people are always going to be divided on. If you're pro-life and I'm pro-choice, we can talk until we're blue in the face, but we're going to draw a line in the sand on that issue. Ultimately, we have to move on to something else that's going to allow us to find that common ground.
Yes. And that affects the majority of people, like healthcare or the environment.
Well, the economic component is huge. When you talk to people, and what we did, and I don't know if you're familiar at all with the campaign that we ran in 20, but we ran a service-based campaign. Our volunteers were out doing community service all throughout the district. So the idea is, if you want to represent the district and show them what that looks like. And what representation is supposed to look like is service. And I found through our campaign that when you show people that you care and you want to help them, the issues that you don't agree on they vanish, because what people realize is that you're there to serve them. You don't have to agree with them on everything, but that your intent is to be a public servant. And when you demonstrate that, and especially to people that are vulnerable and have never had somebody even come and knock on their door, we knocked on every door and was basically like, what can we do for you? And when you approach people that way, which they looked at, like, there were people that looked at me like I was nuts. They're like, nobody ever knocked on their door and asked, like, what do you need? And when you are out there to actually serve, people will recognize that and they will support you, even if they don't agree with you on everything. And I think that, and my goal is to encourage every candidate to run a service-based campaign, because at the end of the day, win or lose, that still helped and that still builds the movement to help people. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Oh, 100%. I agree with you. I mean, that's how I live my life in general. And so I don't have the money to pay a staff. Everybody that's working on my campaign is there doing it because they see me live my life that way. And like you said earlier, loyalty is free. It really is. They know I'm there for them, and I know I can rely on them as well. It's just a part of that, showing your service and your servant's leadership. So,
and don't be afraid to go into, downtown Asheville and talk to people. They may initially think,
Drum circle. I'll meet you at the drum circle. Do you ever go to the drum circle on Friday night?
Yeah, we brought our kids down to the drum circle several times. I have a drum that I've purchased just for the drum circle.
Okay, people, she goes to the drum circle. That's a very impressive thing.
And I also think that a very important message that must be conveyed that I think a lot of people don't understand, especially in Asheville, and this is all due respect to the Democratic candidates who are running in this race. This is a +9, borderline +10 R district. And so you are not flipping it, especially in a year like this. You're not even going to get close. So everyone who's spending this money and thinking that, oh yeah, well, we're gonna show it to Madison, I guess he'll only win by 8 points instead of 12. It's still him getting reelected, and then you have the prospect of what could be coming in 24. But the truth is, there needs to be pushback. You can't have this dictatorial approach to politics. Everyone thinks that Trump just does it in the GOP. Look, the Democratic establishment does the same thing. Everyone bows at the altar of Queen Pelosi. So, we recognize that this is a serious problem that exists within two parties. Which obviously we need,
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that. We were just looking at the quarterly reports that dropped for both Madison Cawthorne and the highest receipt taker, Jasmine Beach Ferraro on the Democrat side. And they similarly have taken in and spent a lot of the relatively same percentages of money, large sums of money in and around DC. So, it's like they want to say how different they are from one another, but it's really the very same tactics. It's less service-based and more reinforcing the platform, the two-party system. They both have the same agenda at the end of the day. So
okay, so I have a good question for you, and I don't want to debate the issue. It's neither here nor there as far as what we think, but tell me what you think of what I'm about to say. So let's say that you're not pro-choice, but let's say that the majority of people that live in your district are. Okay, like we know that. So and this is the one issue, for me, it's capital punishment. That's the issue where I'm not in line with the majority, and I recognize I'm not in line with the majority. And so my question for you is that, do you see your position as a representative about sort of imposing, okay, well, this is what I think, versus going with what the majority of people think? Because we have someone in the chat saying that your website, like wanting to know what you feel about statewide abortion bans.
Yeah.
And the problem I have with this is philosophically, I understand your position. Like I do, I completely understand it. And even if I agreed with it, let's say I agreed with it 100%, the majority of people in this country support a woman's right to choose. They do, period, full stop. Like that's not even questionable. So as a representative, and I've always said this, the job is to do what the majority of people want you to do. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, as I had said earlier, it's not my job to go in and reinforce the echo chamber of one party. It's to represent the majority of people, regardless of how they affiliate politically. And so I'm not here to impose my personal beliefs on anybody. I know it sounds a little, I guess, crazy, but I can compartmentalize the Constitution and government from going to church on Sunday.
Right.
Separation of church and state.
Well,
what a novel thought.
I mean, I've had a lot of very good conversations with people that are pro-life. And while I don't agree with it politically, I understand it philosophically. And I understand the dilemma for people. But in reality, in a democracy, or what we're supposed to be in a democracy, it's a majority rule situation. And if we accept that it's a majority rule situation, then we wouldn't be where we are in most policies. Most people support legalization of cannabis. Most people support single-payer healthcare. Most people want us out of all the wars. Most people want a lot of things that aren't happening because our representatives don't actually represent us. And so my thought is, like, it's okay to have whatever opinions people have. But if you're going anywhere to be a zealot on behalf of your opinions, then you're not there doing the job of a representative. And I think that we get very caught up in what people's opinions are. And like, that's the problem. And so I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, even though I don't agree with it politically, the pro-life sentiment. I'm willing to support somebody if they're willing to acknowledge that their opinion is not the majority opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And not, you know what I'm saying? And understand that their job is to do what the majority of people want them to do.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely understand and agree. So.
Yeah.
And I think one of the best places to wind down this conversation is, you know, when Jen ran for Congress against Wasserman Schultz, who's one of the most entrenched representatives in the United States, most people would probably acknowledge that as much. You know, one of the things that we noticed is how the tentacles run very deep, especially within the county. Broward County has a notorious reputation politically at the national level, which is kind of amazing. But the things that we notice in terms of, you know, where labor stands, even though Debbie is completely anti-labor, her votes speak for themselves, especially regarding the anti-worker trading, trade agreements that she supports. And so what I would like to know, I think, Jen, you would agree, is how does it work on the GOP side where you are? Because even though most people think that Madison is a disaster, probably akin to the same level as somebody like a Wasserman Schultz, people are still going to get in line, I guess is the question.
He's not as entrenched as she is, though.
Well, no, he's not. He's
enough to be that entrenched. But yeah, talk a little bit about what it's been like there locally with like labor and with you versus
just like people in the GOP in general, like what that's like, and you know who has been receptive, and frankly, who are the people who are just they're not going to rock the boat kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's hard to tell who won't rock the boat because typically those people aren't going to speak up. I would say out of the people that show up at this point, as Cawthorne has created a situation where he's making us look very bad. We are very proud people of our mountain values, and that typically goes back to Christian values, but just down to earth, very morally sound. And when you have somebody who's going around talking about orgies and cocaine, it becomes an embarrassment. And so I would say the establishment GOP is quite sick of it here, and they're going to rally around someone who is more of someone like you had to go up against, who has been there for a long time, and which is we have a senator here who's also running, state senator who's running for the congressional seat. And so, you've got a lot of the Cawthorne votes are going to go swing towards that more establishment, more same ideas, still pushing the same rhetoric, just in a polished, non-embarrassing way. And so it's more just the go along to get along, and I'm just not willing to do that. So I'm getting more of the moderate or fed up Republicans. A lot of them have already switched to unaffiliated over, the last 5 to 7 years, just because of what's been going on. And because that's our largest voting bloc now, an unaffiliated electorate could change, the partisan politics, or at least some outcomes. And that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
What are the voting rules for the primary? You can is it same day voter registration? You could switch your affiliation the day of election.
No,
or is it open primary?
I just put it up.
April 22nd is the last day to change your voter registration. And an unaffiliated voter, it's an open primary in that they can show up on that day and pick a Democratic ticket or a Republican ticket.
Okay,
Yeah.
But a Democrat can't switch to Republican.
No, and vice versa. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
That's a semi-open primary, and I think that's one that, frankly, is probably the best option, especially if people prefer to be independent, which, frankly, that's where the majority of the country is now.
Yeah. And so I try to explain, and you already mentioned this, with an R+10, you're not going to switch it to blue, no matter how hard you try right now. And I'm not saying that to discourage the other side from, championing their person. It's just the reality. If you take away unaffiliated voters, there's just still more Republicans than there are Democrats. And so, that's just the way it is. We did about 2 or 3 weeks ago, this district went above, the unaffiliated took over as the number one party, unaffiliation. And so, this is a real doable thing for this voting bloc to really have a say. And I love it because if you're a political scientist, they're pulling these extremes back. It's like, hey, if we can change the outcome of an election, then both sides need to rein their policy views and their rhetoric in. And so that would be a nice change.
And before we go, what are your key issues that you're focusing on policy wise? What are the things that are most important or that you think most differentiate you from the incumbent at this point?
Well, a lot does. But the biggest thing for me, and I'll try to wrap it up into a nice little package here, is strengthening the middle class, because that's how you strengthen democracy. And so if you've ever seen democracies fall in other countries, typically they thin out and get rid of the middle class and then utilize the military to take over the impoverished. And so strengthening the middle class means we have to diversify our industries a little bit more, bring those industries into rural areas. I think we can do that by changing the minimum wage for federal minimum wage to being a variable minimum wage. And what that means is you go based off the cost of living indexes that already exist.
Living wage. Yeah.
Living wage. The living wage.
Yeah. That's one of the terms being used. And so it's based on the housing market for that area. And then we use HUD, Section 3 specifically, that gives tax incentives to these companies who build in rural areas to invest in that workforce housing around those areas. And so in doing that, their payroll will be a little less because it's a rural area. So the cost of living is lower. And so you create this interwoven mechanism to tie wages, jobs, and housing all together. And then, they kind of self-regulate because nobody's going to want the housing market to go up because then the wages go up, right? And your payroll expense goes up. And so, I think that's one way to really, and it cuts down on rural resentment, which is real. And so, it'll help my district, which is, I would say 13 out of the 15 counties is extremely rural, and they have a really hard time. The other thing would be broadband, because you're not going to get those companies. You're not going to get those companies to go anywhere out in rural areas if you can't get them access to the internet, and good access to the internet. So,
yeah, that was definitely I'm very direct about what I thought. Trump did well as president. Axing the TPP was the number one thing, in my opinion. One of the worst things he did was put a GPI in charge of the FEC. And of course, universal broadband is something that everybody needs. This is a nonpartisan issue. There is nothing partisan about it whatsoever. But unfortunately, it was made that way.
Yeah, we have to redefine broadband at the government's level in order to make it fit into all the forms of money we could put towards it. It really needs to be redefined at all levels of government so that we can get the money we need towards that infrastructure.
In regards to, we obviously addressed all of these major issues, but I think you really hit a lot of things right on the head in terms of where we really see a lot of things in common. If somebody's being paid a living wage, then you're really not, you're not going to be dealing with the welfare issue, for example. And the other thing that you brought up regarding like how we're able to bring these people together from when you specifically said bringing jobs to more rural areas, that's essentially decentralization of the economy. I agree with that 100%. I think centralizing the economy is way too much of a problem. And that's a huge common ground issue I think we can agree on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
How can people find you?
I'm a horrible politician in this way. So wendynevarez.com. And then my handle at all of my social media, including YouTube, is at Wendy FORWNC.
Guys, if you're not currently following Wendy on social media, please do. Please lend a hand. Again, non-corporate candidates is who we platform, even if you don't agree with where they stand all the way politically. I think it's very important that we try to uplift these voices as much as we can. And you're doing a great job, Wendy. I really hope things pan out, obviously, 10 times better and then some than the incumbent. I like Jen's philosophy. Let's just call it that. The incumbent. That's who we're hopefully for not much longer. Guys, Wendy Nevarez.com. Check her out. Wendy, thank you so much. And we certainly look forward to it.
It was nice to meet you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Peter.
Bye.
Bye.
She's lovely.
Since when did our chat turn into a bunch of dicks?
No, it's like all these people seriously step off. And it's like, you know what? Yeah.
We're having a friendly conversation here, guys. And
it's like I honestly wonder why some people bother watching if they are not satisfied with content. Do you want to do news?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so you are familiar with the story.
People that we thought were our friends are basically bashing the hell out of us tonight.
I'm so used to it at this point. Yeah. Like ridiculous. All right, we got some interesting stuff, people. We have some interesting things.
So Biden announces energy waiver on summer ethanol ban to combat rising gas prices. Now, take with this what you will, but I do think that, we talked about ethanol in regards to it's a biofuel. I don't know enough about it in terms of its safety, its danger. To me.
Well, here's the thing about it. Okay, yeah. It's cheaper and it leaves more of a carbon footprint. Okay, so it's like a balance scenario. So on the one hand, what he's saying he's doing is lowering the gas prices. Okay. But then on the other hand, it's making an infinitely worse impact on the environment, especially in the summer months, which is why that we have those certain limits on the ethanol percentage in the gas. And so my take on it is that that is a dog and pony show to cover up for the fact that the fossil fuel industry is raping us. And instead of addressing the real issue as to why our costs are high, which, by the way, have nothing to do with anything in Ukraine or Russia, but really because fossil fuel industry is trying to recoup their losses from COVID. And when you look at it like that, I kind of feel like this little, I'll do this to help you with the money is just like show. It's theater and it's worse for the environment. So that's my take on it. Thoughts?
I think unfortunately, as we've talked about, anytime he comes up with a solution, it's always bullshit, because ultimately he has the authority to implement the Defense Production Act. And if he were to do that, we could be building out a non-carbon based type of system. And it could be built with, if he's only there for one term, but he puts that in within 2.5 years, 3 years, you'd be amazed at what he could accomplish. But again, when you are beholden to corporate special interest money, then you're going to get what you're going to get. And
I just think this is one of those things where it's some sort of token thing that the Democrats or the establishment or Joe or whoever is in charge of this is trying to make it look like they're doing what they can to help the people with gas prices, when in fact they're not. They don't care, and they're reaping profits all the way from here to Afghanistan. That's what I think. So I think, to me, it's silly. And that's that. But I just thought it was interesting. So we're willing to temporarily screw the environment even more to give you a false sense of us giving a shit to lower gas prices.
And we're demonetized.
But we're not really, by the way. You can have that. It's just a matter of it can't be predominantly that. Because otherwise, all of our videos would end up demonetized, and they're not.
New York officers who shoved protester in Buffalo, yes, Buffalo, because of course that city just can't get out of its own damn way. See, I was going to say the G word, but I'm not going to say it. To be reinstated. Ain't that lovely? This is why we support qualified immunity. It goes without saying that accountability for police officers in the United States will only come as a result of them being held accountable, and this is how you do it.
Yeah, now this is a case where it really does make a difference. Like a lot of times what bothers me about, okay, qualified immunity doesn't solve the criminal issue. These guys were already, they were found to not have committed any wrongdoing. They weren't indicted. And so the criminal aspect of it is something that I still think needs to be addressed separately. But the fact that they're reinstated to their jobs, that would not happen if we got rid of qualified immunity, because this police department would not want that liability.
They literally hurt this guy on camera. It's not like they didn't see it. It wasn't like it was somebody reported it. You can literally see him use his gun as a tactical weapon to smash this guy in the head, hit the ground. You saw what happened. It's absolutely horrific.
Well, and even if again, but so I don't agree with that there was no criminal wrongdoing, but even if we were to just say, okay, fine, they weren't found of criminal wrongdoing, but I don't think they should get their jobs back either. Again, I don't think that somebody having any one particular job is their right. And I think that certain people should be held to higher standards. I think police officers are those people that should be held to higher standards. And I don't think that people like this should have that job. So the fact that they weren't criminally liable is, I don't agree with. And the fact that they got their jobs back could be helped if we got rid of qualified immunity. So that getting rid of qualified immunity doesn't solve everything, but this would help this, because this department wouldn't want that liability. That's what.
And so the climate crisis is supercharging rainfall and hurricanes. Another example of what happens when the waters get warmer. And these superstorms just get more and more powerful, and they could be done in a lot of different ways. Could be wind, could be rain, could be endless rain. You know, like you said, the Category 3 hurricane decided to sit over Miami for
no. Honestly, it doesn't even have to be a hurricane. That was Superstorm Sandy. That's the point. Yeah. Is that we look at hurricanes based on Category 1 through 5, and as a native Floridian growing up, anything less than a 3, we weren't even putting up shutters for. You know what I'm saying? Like we grew up, but now the storms sit for longer. So you're not just talking about and you're not just talking about sea surge, but what you're talking about is a deluge of rain for days that didn't used to be the case. Why are we getting feedback, Peter? It's coming on your end.
Sorry, I had a little audio issue.
Okay. So, that's the problem. And so it doesn't even require a hurricane. That's what bothers me, is they're making it be like, oh, if a hurricane, doesn't have to be a hurricane, it can be a tropical storm. And if it sits over us for a certain amount of time, we're toast. Because the bottom line is our infrastructure cannot handle that rain dump and drainage. It just can't. Fort Lauderdale will be swimming in sewage.
Oh, and, don't worry. Dean Trantillis will do whatever he has to do to get Elon Musk's tunnel from downtown Fort Lauderdale out to A1A. So that way the rich are very happy. Let's put it that way.
Right. Don't worry. If you're very wealthy, you'll still be able to get your little underground shuttle from downtown Fort Lauderdale to the beach. It'll go through the sewage, but you should get there on the other end okay. The rain thing is huge, and people don't understand that. They look at it and think, oh, it only matters what category the storm is. No, it doesn't, because I can tell you we get enough king tides here and everybody's underwater even without any storm. So we have a situation here and nobody's taking it seriously.
And that unfortunately that'll be the obituary of South Florida when eventually it happens.
Oh,
nobody took it seriously.
Well, everything south of Lake Okeechobee is going to be part of the Everglades. You should be aiming for higher ground. And last but certainly not least, one of the things that has been like the bane of my existence as somebody from South Florida, U.S. welcomes Ukrainians with open arms while deporting Haitians. And I hate to get into a whole thing about what aboutism, but you know what? I grew up here watching the disparate treatment of the Haitian population. It is disgusting. Yeah. It's disgusting. Now, we usually see it in comparison to Cubans. Cubans come over, we roll out a red carpet. How can we help you? What kind of jobs can we give you? How can we subsidize you? How can we educate you? Haitians come here and we stick them in cages and then send them back to Haiti.
Yeah.
So the difference in treatment is grotesque. So now the difference is we're seeing, and again, I'm fully in favor of opening arms and welcoming Ukrainians. I have no beef with the Ukrainians. They're more than welcome. But I think it's important to point out the hypocrisy and the disparate treatment of people based on skin color. And to think it's not based on that is completely ignorant.
Well, depending on what the media will tell you and you're allowed to focus on, and that, of course, is a big part of it. And
it is. We have a long history of issues with Haiti. That is our problem, because basically we don't like that they didn't want to be slaves and they successfully revolted. And so as a result, we punished them and basically screwed them over for perpetuity by making them hand over all of their everything to France for years. And we are continuously punishing the Haitians. And it's just something that really, really irks me. So I'll take any opportunity to just sort of be on a soapbox about how we treat the Haitians.
And so one last thing that I do want to mention, Kyle Irving brought up qualified immunity only protects the individual employee from civil lawsuits, will not do anything. Actually, I disagree with you. The truth is, if you removed qualified immunity, you would now take the burden of the taxpayer out of the equation, and it would be placed squarely on the police department. And the reason that that's important is because most of them know who the bad cops are.
They'll have to have their malpractice insurance or whatever it is, and let them pay those premiums and let that come out of their retirement funds.
And that's when it'll stop, because ultimately the only way policing in the United States changes is if the police police the police, if that makes sense. That's it. That's the only way it'll happen. And so if it's going to hurt them in their bottom line, it'll change like that. And that's it. It's no different than why do we have, issues with Social Security? It's because there's a cap on taxable income, meaning that the rich literally get away with murder regarding Social Security. You can make $10 million a year and only get taxed. I think it's like $135,000 of that income goes to Social Security. And that's a percentage of that, small percentage. So again, most of our problems that we have are pretty self-explanatory as far as I can tell. And being able to fix them requires us having conversations like we've had tonight, which I think have been very effective. Even though we're speaking with people on, other sides of the political spectrum, really not that far off, I think, in a lot of ways.
No. No, and honestly, if people are willing to represent their constituents, then I honestly am not as concerned with what their personal opinions are. So it's just a matter of if people will accurately, do that.
Yeah. And so we hope you guys have enjoyed this conversation. Obviously, it's been very unique and interesting, but one that we weren't entirely shocked was going to ultimately produce some common ground, which I think is great.
No. And as much as people want to see fighting and arguing and debating and talking about, wedge issues, it's just not going to happen here. No. I have no interest in that. There are plenty of other channels to go get your wedge debates from.
So next week, we're going to be speaking with amazing California activist Meg Lay, who has started her own podcast. She is going to be joining us on Monday evening at 8:30. We'll see if we get another candidate that will come on. On Wednesday, 420, we are doing our special 420 Free the Weed live stream from 4 to 6. We're having some great guests come on along the way.
We are.
It would be a lot of fun. In addition to that, the following week on Monday, the 25th, I believe we are going to have back the Cavernacle, or actually it'll be his first time on our podcast. He is another streamer, the one that we were on with Mike Figueredo.
Oh yeah, he was great. He was great.
Yeah.
For sure.
And then lastly, on the 27th, Wednesday the 27th, we are having a very special universal healthcare panel that is going to feature 3 of the top people in this fight in the United States.
Wow.
California Representative Ash Kalra will come on, and we will ask him about what went wrong in Sacramento. We are going to have State Senator Gustavo Rivera come back as well. He is going to be talking about the New York Health Act. And then we are going to talk to who I think is one of the most important voices in the universal healthcare movement, Wendell Potter, who is who's a former, I think, president of Cigna for about 20 years. And he defected and said, no, it's all BS. We definitely, have a for-profit system. That's a joke. And that is something that I think we could find a lot of fight on.
One more thing I want to promote, guys.
Friday night,
I am co-hosting with Ben Hawk a virtual fundraiser for Nina Turner. Our special guests are going to be Phil Agnew and Gary Chambers, who is running for U.S. Senate in Louisiana. And we're going to be focusing primarily on cannabis legalization, criminal justice reform, and basically that is going to be the topic of discussion. And of course, Her Royal Highness will be joining us as well. And and so that'll be really fun. Tomorrow, I am going to be on the Michael Knowles show. I think the show goes on at 9:30.
Yep.
Is that right? Yeah.
Or 9:15, I think.
Well, that's when I get on. But yeah, and that's Eastern time. So that's tomorrow morning on Livewire, right? That's the network is Livewire, Michael Knowles show. I don't know, that'll be fun. And so guys, check us out. And if you can, please, if you can come on Friday night to the fundraiser, to the virtual fundraiser, it'd be great. You got to RSVP to get the Zoom link. But yeah, the more the merrier.
The fact that we now have
I'm thinking I might be smoking live. I'm thinking that if it's Gary Chambers and me, I mean, I don't know.
We'll see what happens, but remember, don't upset Nina. Let her, gotta have that good moment and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's been a great show, and the fact that we now have basically the next 3 weeks covered in terms of very important discussions. We hope you all have enjoyed it, but remember, Jen, you spelled Patreon wrong. Even when you try to help, you fail.
See what happens when you're not here? Well, I feel like I just I'm all over the place here. But guys, we need, if you are not a Patreon, it's just a small transpose thing. But yeah, join. It's good. It helps. And it allows us to do the things that we're going to do. We are going to be in Cleveland at the end of the month. We are going to be canvassing for the last weekend of Get Out the Vote for Nina. We will be there the Saturday and Sunday canvassing, hitting the pavement. I actually don't mind. Actually, I don't mind the idea of canvassing for someone else. I just don't like doing it for myself. I'm a lot more enthusiastic to canvass for Nina than I was for when it was me.
Well, when you have great candidates that are out there, it's very easy to do that, but you got to canvass for yourself. How come I have no problem canvassing for myself, but you do?
Because it's hard for me. I don't like it. And I hate asking for money for myself, but I can do it for Nina. So guys, help us out. There is no shortage of her going to be, they're going to try their same nonsense. And it's going to just start like, I think that endorsement coming out today, I did talk about it in the beginning. We talked about it.
Absolutely tasteless, but I don't expect anything less. And that's unfortunately the world we're living in right now. So with that said, we're very appreciative that you guys are all here this evening. If you like our work and value what we're trying to do here, patreon.com/generational change. Any amount helps, $5 a month, $10 a month, $25 a month. It all matters. It helps us get to Cleveland.
It helps us be able to maybe buy that new fancy microphone that Sean was telling us about.
Yes. So we really appreciate you all. And obviously, if you like it, join. And if not, we still appreciate you anyway. Make sure you subscribe, like, comment, and share. And we will see you on Monday.
All right. Bye. Will you please call me?
Yes.
Thank you.